Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 180 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _ Mark, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Shane Haff. One of my favorite football weekends of all time. Had a really, really good gambling Sunday. I think I broke even on Saturday, but ultimately Notre Dame beats USC. I despise USC with the fire of 1,000 suns, and the Eagles take down the Ravens. I do not despise the Ravens, but big win nonetheless. I mean, how many times in a row have I said fun to do these pods on Victory Monday or Victory Tuesday? I think it's 8 in a row now.
Yeah, down with Lincoln Riley. So I'm right there with you.
There you go. I forgot about the connection. Might be, by the way, he might be all the way down and out without a job in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I'd sure just hate to see that, but we'll see what happens.
Would you take him back?
No, not interested. Not interested. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I've got no interest.
I have a long time take on Lincoln Riley that I actually think he's one of the rare college coaches who's meant to be an NFL coach. I don't think he cares about defense. So but the problem is, if you're an NFL head coach and you don't care about defense, you can at least hire a defensive coordinator and your GM is making the picks. So they're handling the talent, and this is a weird tangent to go off on the start of the pod. But if your defensive coordinator is totally handling that side of the ball, your GM is handling the talent for that side of the ball, I don't think it's as much of a problem. When you're the head coach of a college team, you have to go out and recruit. You have to find guys on the defensive side of the ball that fit into your system, even though Lincoln Riley doesn't have a system on defense because it's been terrible. He had Alex Grinch for all those years, and he has D'Anthony Lynn. Now it's a little bit better, but the offense is way worse now. But I'm of the opinion that he is still an offensive genius. I think he's a great play caller and a great play designer, really innovative. I mean, look at all the quarterbacks that he, developed through his time there. But I would never want him to be my college head coach because there's a clear ceiling on what he is defensively. But maybe even an offensive coordinator. I'm not even saying head coach. I think he'd be the perfect hire as an offensive coordinator in the NFL.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds a lot like what people said about Cliff Kingsbury when he went to the NFL. And he found his spot now as an offensive coordinator after the head coach thing didn't work out. But I mean, I think he's a better coach than Cliff Kingsbury. But
I agree. I really agree. And he had a lot, even if we want to nitpick Lincoln Riley, he had a lot more success in college than Cliff Kingsbury did.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I won't say we shouldn't wish for anybody to get fired because I will be laughing hysterically. But there's a lot of hatred there between Oklahoma people.
If Kellen Moore gets hired away, and Lincoln Riley gets fired by USC, I'll be campaigning for Lincoln Riley to come take the Eagles OC job, get together with Jalen again.
Oh, I would be very conflicted. But let's not do that thought exercise. Let's instead jump into our NFL game slate. We're going to lead off with the NFC East games. Then we're going to tackle the Sunday games, and at the very end, we'll circle back to the Thanksgiving and Friday games. Just because we're already 4 minutes into a show and we haven't even mentioned a football game yet, an NFL game that is. And so we don't want to be rushing through Sunday games at the end of the show. So we're going to do it that way. We'll start off with the New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this was a Thanksgiving game, but since it involves two divisional opponents, we'll lead off with it. DeMarvin Overshown stole the show for the Cowboys. As a team that is just looking to the future at this point, he appears to be a budding star. Has an incredible pick six where he tipped the ball up on a screen pass to himself, catches it and scores a touchdown. Almost collides with the official while trying to make the catch. That would have been a hilarious pass breakup by the official. He also recovered a fumble. He ends with 9 tackles, and the Cowboys sacked Drew Lock 6 times, including 1.5 sacks by Micah Parsons, who recorded 6 total pressures in the game. Rico Dowdle carried the ball 22 times for 122 yards and a touchdown as the Cowboys improved their home record to 1-5, their first win of the year at home on Thanksgiving. I think for Eagles fans, you should have wanted the Cowboys to win this game.
Yeah.
Because if one of these teams is going to be in play for like a top 2 to 3 pick, I would rather it be the Giants, because the Cowboys already have the quarterback. Yep. And the Cowboys are generally just a more competent organization than the Giants. So I think this was the outcome that Eagles fans should have been rooting for, although it's certainly fun to see the Cowboys lose, and you don't want the Giants to end up with the top pick either.
Yeah, if the Giants, the Giants getting the top pick would be annoying, but they are so far behind being somewhat competitive that it's hard to be too worried. And, I say that confidently because I think Brian Daboll's a really good coach. I still think so. And I think he's another guy who's going to get fired and be a great offensive coordinator somewhere next year. But they have such a talent gap between them and the rest of the NFL. If they get a good quarterback, nice. I don't even know if we'll be able to see that he's good right away in the NFL due to how bad the rest of the team will be. And then if they do get a good quarterback, fine. You'll kind of be in the Patriots position where, you have absolutely no talent around the guy and you've got a long way to go until you can get competitive with him. So I agree totally with that. Dallas, there is still part of me that thinks if you got a big creative this offseason, they have a building block of studs there, obviously with Dak and Lamb and Parsons. And now you mentioned Overshown, obviously Diggs, a couple of the guys on the defense. If you just made 2 good draft picks, made like 2 or 3 good free agent signings, hired a new head coach, kind of changed the regime out, I think there's a pretty good chance Dallas is right back in the mix next year. Obviously, they're 5-7 this year. Dak has missed some games. They had problems before Dak got hurt, but you imagine they're probably 6-6 or 7-5 if Dak was healthy right now. So part of me thinks we're all kind of crapping on the Cowboys right now. There's probably a good chance they're right back in the mix next year.
Yeah, it'll all come down to that head coach hire, assuming they do move on. So,
and if they got that top 5 pick, you bring in a Travis Hunter, a Tet McMillan, Will Campbell on the offensive line, whoever the case may be. You bring in one of those guys, and they are elite in year one, the way we're seeing guys like Brock Bowers or Joe Alt or Quinyon Mitchell, some stud rookies this year. Jared Verse have stepped in and been if not all pros, all pro contenders right away as rookies. If Dallas got one of those guys, you're telling me that they wouldn't be right back in the mix next year? I think they probably would be.
Yeah, I mean, the last time the Cowboys had a top 10 pick, they ended up with Micah Parsons. So they may not. Honestly, they draft okay, but
they draft pretty well.
I was kind of scrolling back through the 2023 draft is pretty bad with Mozzie Smith and Luke Schoonmaker, but you look at some of their, he played better. I think he played well in this game, and he started to play a little better, but he was still a reach for them. But yeah, I would rather them continue to win football games at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Then not much more to be said. I think both of these guys will be fired.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go to Washington.
Actually, real quick, let's do like a running tally as we go through the games. How many coaches are getting fired at the end of this year? Are we both at 2?
Maybe. I'm not sure about Daboll getting fired, but I'll go with you on that. So 2.
Let's say 2. All right.
Okay. So let's go to Washington, where Washington blasts the Titans 42-19. Their offense got back on track in this game. They scored a touchdown on their first 4 drives before they missed a 46-yard field goal on their 5th drive. And the Titans went punt, fumble to start the game. Tennessee had only run 10 offensive plays at the point they were down 28-0. Washington's run game was on point in this game. Brian Robinson Jr. rushed for 103 yards and a touchdown. Chris Rodriguez rushed for 94 yards and a touchdown. Jaden Daniels rushed for 34 yards and a touchdown. Overall, the team rushed for 267 yards. And it's been a rough month for the Commanders' offense, and they bounced back in a big way. It's against a really bad team, so we'll see if it sticks. I still have my doubts about the offense. They can certainly be dangerous at any given moment. But I do think there is a ceiling on this offense as they approach the back stretch of the season.
I thought Jaden looked great in this game, which I was, I did quarterback rankings on my radio show on Saturday. And once you go past the top 4, everyone on that list has blemishes. I chose to not even end up ranking the rookies because I was like, it's too hard. Jaden was probably a top 5 quarterback the first 6 weeks. Probably been like, I don't know if he's been a top 15 quarterback the last, 4 to 6 weeks, whatever stretch you want to pick out of that. But it's good to see, not for us, but for Washington fans, for Jaden Daniels fans, for NFL fans, for Jaden Daniels fantasy owners, whatever you want to say. It's good to see him kind of look like the guy that people fell in love with the first month of the year, because I was kind of getting worried that maybe that guy was gone for the year with whatever injuries had piled up. And obviously we knew about the ribs. I'm sure there's some other stuff. He's just so small. He does take a lot of hits with the amount that he runs. You do have to worry about hits piling up throughout the year. But I thought yesterday was the healthiest he's looked in a long time. And you mentioned, I have doubts about what the offense can be down the stretch. Me too. But I do feel vindicated after last week. I feel like a lot of people were saying they were going to miss the playoffs, and they were kind of counting them out a little bit. You have at Saints next week. You have at Cowboys to end the year. I know they just lost to the Cowboys, but if you're able to beat the Saints and the Cowboys, it's a 10-win team, even if you lose to the Eagles and the Falcons. And the Falcons aren't looking so great anymore. Sorry to Joe Chick, who we have a comment from saying a good statement win from the Commanders after the 3-game skid, need to win 3 the next 4 for playoffs. I don't think so, Joe. You don't think they'll get in at 10-7? Like, where's the other wild card coming from that's going to knock them out at 10-7, I guess is my question. I don't think we're going to get like Seattle 7-5. We have Arizona and LA at 10-6 or 11-6. I don't think the second place team in that division is only going to lose one more game the rest of the year or go undefeated the rest of the year. So, you have Atlanta and Tampa both at 6-6. I think as long as Washington just takes care of business in the 2 games, they'll be heavily favored in against the Saints and then at Dallas at the end of the year. I think they're in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not worried about them missing the playoffs. I don't know how much damage they can do once they get there. But you also see sometimes the safeguards taken off when it comes to running your quarterback in the postseason. And yes, so, it wouldn't surprise me if wild card weekend, Jaden Daniels runs for 100 yards or something like that either. So point. Dangerous team. It'll be interesting to see their offense, if it can be consistent over the rest of the season.
I will say the thing about them making noise, I think it's probably dependent on the seed you get. If you get the 7 seed this year, I think you're probably screwed no matter how this kind of breaks down. Assuming Detroit and Philly are the top 2 seeds, or even if we want to say like Green Bay beats Detroit and, things get crazy and Green Bay takes the seed, those top 2 seeds are going to be so much better than the 3 and 4 seed, the NFC South and NFC West winner, whether that's Atlanta or Tampa, and whether that's Seattle or Arizona or LA. I think that there is going to be a massive gap. That 5 and the 6 seed probably going to be favored on the road. If it's Minnesota and Green Bay, I imagine Minnesota's probably favored on the road against those teams, and same obviously with Green Bay. So I think there's a big gap between wanting that 7 seed or wanting one of those first 2 wild cards if you're Washington. Going to be hard for them to get there with Minnesota and Green Bay already ahead of them, though.
Yeah, regardless, you're probably playing the 1 seed in the second round, but you would love to avoid going 2 out of 3 against presumably Detroit and the Eagles. You would rather not do that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, let's get into the
Yeah, Joe Check was chiming in. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, not in terms of making the playoffs, but seeding. Would rather play the NFC West or Atlanta Bucks. Yeah, good absolutely. Call, so let's keep rolling here. And again, we're going to do the Sunday slate, and then we'll circle back to Thanksgiving at the end if we have time. It will make time, but it might be fast. But let's go to Atlanta, where the Chargers beat the Falcons. They only put up 187 yards of offense, but their defense dominated the Falcons. They picked off Kirk Cousins 4 times, held them to 1 of 4 in the red zone, held them to 3 of 14 on third downs. They were 2 of 4 on fourth downs. For the Falcons, they entered this game and they only had 10 sacks, and they sacked Justin Herbert 5 times, but they could not overcome their offense. It was just dreadful. Kirk Cousins has not thrown a touchdown pass in 3 games, and he has negative 24.6 EPA in those 3 games, which ranks 3rd worst among quarterbacks. and he is the worst on an EPA per play basis in the NFL, edging out, who do you think's number 2 or second worst?
I don't know. Who is it?
Aaron Rodgers.
There you go. Obviously, there you go. I should have known.
Yeah, if I gave you more time to prep, you would have got that one. So
yeah,
time to panic in Atlanta about the quarterback.
I think it might be time to panic that they maybe messed the hire up also with Raheem Morris. His career record now 27-44 as a head coach. I was hoping that maybe you see him kind of be a little bit different at his new spot. It's been a long time since he was a head coach. He was a praised DC. The McVay types loved him. Right now, it's looking a little silly that they bypassed guys like Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel with a pretty good roster and went to hire Raheem Morris. And obviously, Kirk Cousins is the focus. I thought that he made some weird decisions going for it, field goal wise, in this game, and put Kirk in some pretty tough spots a couple times as well. But Kirk was brutal in this game. There's no way around it. I bet on Atlanta. I was really high in Atlanta the whole year long. I wanted. I have a parlay with the Bills, the Chiefs, the Eagles, and the Falcons to all win their division. A couple of weeks ago, that was looking pretty darn good. Now the Falcons looking like they're probably going to blow that for me and give up the division to Tampa down the stretch here. But it's hard to talk about anything in this game except for mentioning how bad Kirk was. I don't even think it was necessarily how good the Chargers defense was. He was throwing it right to them. Like it was brutal. And yeah, Joe Chick chimes in the second and third interceptions, the worst throws he's ever seen him throw. If they miss the playoffs, he's gone, move on and give me Penix. I think that's absolutely what's happening. I've even heard some people saying that Penix should come in now. And I heard, Raheem Morris said Kirk Cousins carried us through parts of the season. He's still our guy. So I don't know if that's even a conversation in-house. Once they give up the lead in the division, I think you have Minnesota this week. Let Kirk play the revenge game. I think if Kirk can't get it going against Minnesota, which I wouldn't want to put a rookie against Minnesota's defense anyway, if they can't get it going offensively this week, you're sitting at 6-7. Tampa probably takes the lead in the division. They have a really easy game with the Raiders. Put Penix in. I think that's where I'm at.
I think that's the smart move. I don't think that's what they'll do because I think Raheem Morris is also facing down being one and done as a head coach, and you probably don't want to throw to a rookie quarterback in the middle of that. So I think they'll write it out with Kirk, although I don't think it's necessarily the best decision.
I think they'd be smart to do the one and done thing with Raheem. I don't think there's any way they fire him.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on to Cincinnati, where the Steelers beat the Bengals 44-38, and holy crap, the Bengals defense is atrocious.
What a joke.
They are a top 5 offense in points per game. And at 4-8, their season's over. They've scored 46 more points than the 11-1 Kansas City Chiefs. They allowed the Steelers to score on 5 straight first half drives. They can't tackle. They give up explosive plays left and right. They just allowed Russell Wilson to throw for 414 yards against them, the second highest total of his career. They've lost 4 games this season while scoring 30-plus points, which is tied for the most in NFL history. And it didn't even start well for Pittsburgh, who threw a pick 6 on their first play of the game, but it was a shootout after that. It's unfortunate that, the Bengals did this to themselves with how they constructed things on defense. So, but it's unfortunate for Bengals fans that their offense is so good and it just doesn't matter. On the Steelers side, George Pickens had an interesting day. He leads the team in receiving yards with 74 and has a touchdown, but he fell on the route on the opening play that led to the pick 6. And then he was flagged for taunting and later flagged for an unsportsmanlike conduct that for a second people thought would mean he was ejected because it was his second personal foul. But it wasn't directed at another player. So he was able to stay with 2 personal fouls in the game. So George Pickens, man, love him or hate him. And sometimes you do both in the same game.
Yeah, I'm still I don't think the Steelers are a real contender when it comes to the Super Bowl. So I don't, this is kind of a tangent here, but how many teams do you think can win the Super Bowl?
Eagles, Packers, Lions on the NFC side. Chiefs, Bills, Ravens on the AFC side. I think that's it. I think 6.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think a lot of people would put the Steelers in that, and I don't think I don't think they can. And I know that the offense stepped up here. I think you're obviously helped by the Bengals defense just being a train wreck. And the one thing I want to say, like, we're all crying for Joe Burrow, and I get it. There's his defense is terrible. It's atrocious. But we do realize that the MVP numbers he's putting up would not be quite as crazy if the defense wasn't as bad, right? Like his numbers would be like 20% worse if his defense wasn't terrible. And we wouldn't probably be making the MVP arguments we're making for him while they're 5-4-8, but because he's behind in a lot of these games, they're having to throw. And the other thing I'll just say about Burrow is this is a little bit of karma, because I feel like he gets 100% credit for my dog is being crazy. I apologize to the people watching us and not listening. You can see my dog Becky hanging on my shadow here, but the Bengals, a little bit of karma for Burrow. I always felt, you go back and look at the stats from his Super Bowl run that gets referenced more than any Super Bowl run I've ever heard for any player or quarterback of my life. And he beat Mahomes. Congratulations. Go look at the amount of points their defense was giving up to really good offenses in that Super Bowl run. And Joe Burrow's gotten 100% of the credit and got it for that Super Bowl run during it, that he took them there. The defense kind of carried him there. So it's a little bit of karma now that the offense is so good and he's putting up these big numbers and the defense is terrible. I'm just saying. I'm not, I'm a little bit of a hater, so I had to throw it out
there. That's fair. That's fair. Anything else you want to throw out on the Steelers here before we move on?
The Steelers, Russ was great in this game. I'm still kind of skeptical about their offense down the stretch, and we saw against the Ravens, they only put up 18 points in that game, and I thought that was a more concerning game than encouraging offensively. But then obviously the snow, you can kind of X that out, but this is big for them. Even if the Bengals defense is bad, they did exactly what you're supposed to do. They have the Browns coming up next. The big test for them, like it always was going to be, is December 15th. They play the Pittsburgh Steelers. December 21st.
You mean
the Pittsburgh Steelers? That's bad. On December 15th, they play at the Philadelphia Eagles. Do you get why I made that mistake?
Yeah,
I'm so used to having to say the opponent.
I knew where you were going.
Yeah, they play at the Eagles. Then December 21st, they play at the Ravens. December 25th, they play the Kansas City Chiefs. That's 3 weeks in a row that they play the Steelers, Ravens, and Chiefs in 10 days.
The Eagles, Ravens, and Chiefs.
My brain has not recovered from Thanksgiving weekend. I saw a tweet this morning being like, wait, there's not football on all day today. And that's exactly how I feel. I feel like the last 5 days I've just rotted and watched football. And apparently my brain agrees with that. But someone commented 0-3. I tend to agree. Like, I don't think that they are going to beat the Eagles. I think the Ravens are destined to split with them this year. And then I think their best chance will be on Christmas on Netflix at home against Kansas City. But that'll be a Wednesday game. It's kind of funky. I'm sure that both teams will be on short rest. But I think there's a good chance they go 0-3 in those games still, even after this win.
Mark's over here reading the schedule about as well as Kirk Cousins was reading the defense this weekend.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I can't. That might have been the worst minute of podcasting of my career.
We'll make that the promo clip.
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right, well, let's go on to Minnesota, where the Vikings beat the Cardinals 23-22, and they overcame a terrible start. They only gained 75 yards in the first half, and they fell behind 19-6 in the third quarter before they started to mount the comeback. Down 6 with 3 minutes and 20 seconds left. The Vikings moved down the field. They converted a 4th and 7 in the process, and they take the lead. Arizona gets the ball back, down 1. With 1:13 left and all 3 timeouts, and they just botched it. Like, they completed a 5-yard pass inbounds and didn't call a timeout. There's 1:13 left. Why are you saving timeouts? Like, under a minute and a half, you should be calling a timeout every time the clock is running in this situation. Like, it's the simplest process. And I'm partially really angry about it because of the Bears too, which we didn't talk about yet. And when I made these notes, I thought we would talk about the Bears first, but instead they let 14 seconds run off the clock, and then they give up a sack because they're rushing. Like, the additional point to that is when you're rushing, you're letting them time the snap count because they know you got to snap it as quickly as possible. You give up the sack, then you take a timeout. Then you end up throwing a pick on 4th and 10. Like, I promise you, managing a clock is not this hard. Like, NFL coaches, I am begging you to get an Xbox Game Pass membership and play a couple games of Madden this offseason online and learn how to manage a freaking clock, because it's an abomination that we see week after week. We saw it prominently on Thanksgiving that we'll get to in a minute. Just mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, we have a comment from Daniel Lee. Thanks for chiming in. Is Jonathan Gannon actually a good DC? I would love y'all's opinion. I'll ask you first on that.
I think Gannon was always a good defensive coordinator. However, in Philly, like, the issue with Gannon was that he relied too much on the pass rush, and he wouldn't, like, he had a great fastball and he had no changeup. And once a team learned just what to do, there was no counterpunch, and you just got nickel and dimed all game. I think it's better, and I think you see them doing some cool stuff, like some of their 3 high safety looks that they run. So I think he's a solid defensive coordinator. I think he does a good job of coaching a secondary. I think maybe he doesn't do the best job making adjustments at times.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And just kind of, this is less of a DC take and just kind of more about the Cardinals in general. It's shocking because they're 6-6. You know, when Jonathan Gannon was hired, it was clear this was a rebuild. You'd think, you know, second year in, after your quarterback misses most of the first year, the team's 6-6, you're in the division race. You should feel good about that, right? Like, you should feel good that that's where you're at as a coaching staff a year and a half or, you know, almost 2 years in. But I watch them week to week, and I just don't think they're well coached. They're so inconsistent. Game to game, half to half, quarter to quarter, drive to drive. You don't know what you're getting from them.
1 of 6 in the red zone in this game.
Exactly. Like, so many times they marched right down the field, and then you can't do anything once you get there. And you have a guy in Kyler Murray who's so dynamic. Figure out a way to get him in space and figure out a way to get him into the end zone. I know that's Drew Petzing. That's not Jonathan Gannon, but obviously that's Jonathan Gannon's coaching staff. And you look at the defensive side of the ball, and yeah, they've done a mostly good job for most of this year. Giving up 9 to the Bears, 6 to the Cardinals, only 16 last week to Seattle. But after a pretty good first half, it felt like they were getting diced up in that second half by Sam Darnold and the Vikings. So it felt like no matter what they did, they couldn't find a stop when they needed it in the second half. So there was also a pretty cowardly go for it decision by Gannon. You're up 3 with 3 minutes and 20 seconds to go. I think it was 4th and 3. That is a no-brainer go for it, in my opinion. If you don't get it, you're up 3 anyway. Like, I get that up 6 instead of up 3, it makes them need a touchdown. A field goal can't tie it. A field goal is not beating you if you give up that. If a touchdown's beating you either way. A touchdown's beating you if you don't kick the field goal or if you kick the field goal. So I don't understand 3 minutes and 20 seconds left. It's not like there's a minute left. Like, I don't understand taking the field goal there at all. I thought it was one of the more cowardly go for it decisions you'll see in 2024.
Yeah, and I believe I'm trying to look it up now. I think that was a go. Like, that was
I heard
go.
88%.
Yeah, it was a go by like 8%, which is a massive win probability swing. Let me see.
I heard that I don't necessarily know what there's a couple different versions of this, and they're all like differently worded. I heard that it was an 88% suggestion to go for it.
Yeah. So the model I use had it as a plus 4.5% win probability to go, which, like, 0.5% to 1% is kind of like, it's a coin flip. Anything over 1% is pretty strongly go. This was 4.5. So, like, this was a huge, like, you better be doing this. And they just didn't. You would almost rather be up by 3 than 6, because what you do when you go up by 6 is you give them an extra play every day, every series, because they are not going to kick a field goal. Like, they are 4 down territory the entire drive. And of course they get the touchdown. And this was Darnold's first career win when he was trailing by 13 or more at any point in a game. He was previously 0-23. So comeback by Sam Darnold, the first time of his career he's pulled one off like this.
Yeah, and Darnold was good in this game. I don't want to, not give Sam Darnold credit because I feel like I don't give him credit a lot. He had a stretch in the middle of the season where he really struggled, and he's been really good lately.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep rolling along. Let's go to New England, where the Patriots lose to the Indianapolis Colts 25-24. And the Anthony Richardson experience just continues. He was really bad for most of this game. He only had 63 yards passing with 5 minutes and 34 seconds left in the game. And then he led a game-winning drive. He converted 3 fourth downs and a 2-point conversion rush to take a 1-point lead for the game. Shane Steichen elects to go for 2 in the win instead of 1 in the tie, and it pays off. And the Patriots had 2 touchdowns taken off the board in this game, 1 for a holding, 1 for an illegal shift. They missed a 25-yard field goal. Drake May hit Hunter Henry in the hands at the goal line on a pass that he not only didn't catch, it then bounced off of his leg and was intercepted. And so a litany of errors for the Patriots, but at 6-7, the Colts still have a shot at the playoffs. And at 3-10, the Patriots still have a shot at the number 1 overall pick. So I think this worked out best for both teams, if I'm being honest.
Definitely. And you have some things to point to with Anthony Richardson, even if it's a bad game. He had to let a game-winning drive. They still scored 25 points in the game. I guess my question is, do the Colts stick with Richardson next year now? Like you're kind of looking at the QB landscape. Seems like a lot of guys are locked in. There's not a ton of great quarterback prospects. It's kind of interesting. Carolina and Indy, 2 teams that I think a couple weeks ago we would have said there's no way Bryce Young and Richardson are starting there next year. I think they're kind of settling into spots where the Colts are probably going to have to start them again next year.
Yeah, I kind of think that you're right. I think both Young and Richardson will probably end up being starters again next year.
Which I kind of feel bad for Steichen with that, because I feel like Steichen's getting stuck with Richardson and having to kind of make it work. And he might get fired, and I think it'd be totally wrong. If Steichen gets fired, I think that's a joke.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to the New York Jets, who lose to Seattle 26-21. And the Jets jumped out to a 14-0 lead in the first quarter. They were up 21-7 when Leonard Williams dropped into coverage and intercepted an Aaron Rodgers pass and then returned it 92 yards for a touchdown. It's the longest interception touchdown by a 300-plus pound player ever. Which I thought was funny, especially against his former team. And it kicked off a comeback for the Seahawks as they scored 19 unanswered and they win 26-21. And my takeaway from this game is that there are no more scapegoats for Aaron Rodgers in New York. They fired the head coach that had the defense playing at a top 5 level. Since then, they've been the number 26 defense. They fired the GM that put together a great roster with the exception of the quarterback. And the guy they left to point the finger at now is Aaron Rodgers, who was 2 of 14 passing in this game when targeting someone 10 yards or more downfield. That's a negative 33% completion percentage over expectation. This year, Aaron Rodgers ranks above only Anthony Richardson, Deshaun Watson, Gardner Minshew, Caleb Williams, and Will Levis in completion percentage over expectation plus EPA. This team would literally have a better chance to win if they benched Aaron Rodgers and put Tyrod Taylor on the field.
Yeah, you're probably right. To be honest, Rodgers has been that bad. You look at the first, I was trying to get this stat. You look at the first 22 minutes of this game, the Seattle Seahawks muffed 2 kicks and missed an extra point. That's like some of the worst special teams you'll ever see. That's the type of stuff that swings a game, and Seattle was still able to win this game. I think that says everything about where the Jets are, and everything about this Jets, organization. I don't think Seattle was good at all in this game, and they were able to overcome 3 massive kind of problems and massive special teams errors to come back and win the game. And, the Jets get up big. You imagine that's like the only way the Jets can win a game. 21 to oh, and I forgot to mention, they also gave up a kickoff return touchdown to go down 21-7. So that's that's also in the first 22 minutes. I can't believe I left out a special teams miscue. I think it might have been like the worst special teams half of all time. And the special teams coordinator is Jay Harbaugh, who you would think, why is that Harbaugh not on Jim or John's staff? That might be a tell. If there's a Harbaugh out there who's not on either of his relative staff when they both coach in the NFL, that might be a tell that he's not the special teams coordinator you want to have. But I walk out of this game feeling worse about Seattle, but they figured out a way to win. So I guess that they're probably just going to go win this division. I don't think they're very good, but here we are.
It'd be funny if there's a Harbaugh that's not related to Jim and John, and like everybody else just assumes he is. And they're like, well, if he's not on their staff, he must not be any good. And he's actually a brilliant coach. He's just not related, but nobody will give him a shot. It'd be kind of funny. We also got a funny comment here from Daniel saying we live in a weird timeline where this offseason we're all going to be on Sam Darnold watch. That's going to be really funny to see how that plays out.
I would not want to be that team.
No.
There's a lot of teams who probably want to be that team. Like the Jets probably want to be that team. The Browns might even want to.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine the Jets signing Sam Darnold back?
But I'm sure they're going to have to look into it. The Titans, they're going to be interested. I'm sure the Raiders will be looking into him. The Giants, that might be it. Maybe the Saints. If they
we live in a funny world where there's two high quality starting NFL quarterbacks that used to play for the Jets, and Sam Darnold and Geno Smith, who don't play for the Jets, while the Jets don't have a starting quarterback.
The Jets would kill for Geno or Darnold right now.
All right, let's keep rolling on here to Jacksonville, where the Texans win 23-20. I think we probably have to start off with this game and talk about Azeez Al-Shaair with one of the dirtiest hits you'll ever see on Trevor Lawrence. He was ejected for the game, and honestly, he should be suspended for the rest of the season, in my opinion. Trevor Lawrence started his slide. Like I always say, don't slide late. Like you would rather take the hit than slide late. Trevor Lawrence started to slide a full 5 yards away from him. And he not only hit him anyways, he launches into him. He throws his metal arm brace into his head. This is the same guy that was flagged for a late hit against Tony Pollard last week. There's no room for that in the NFL. And if the NFL took players' safety seriously, Azeez Al-Shaair should be suspended the rest of the season.
It's anyone who argues against that is wrong. Obviously, that hit was disgusting. There's no place for it in 2024. Hopefully Trevor, I don't even know. You think will he be back this year? Like, I actually don't even know what to expect from that. That was horrible. It is kind of like,
as a 2-win team, there's really no reason.
They shouldn't. They should tank the rest of the year. But Tua, when this happens to Tua, we have these national conversations. And I was shocked at how little was made of this kind of it was just another kind of concussion. It was just as bad as any of the Tua ones we've seen. I guess Tua just has the prior issues that we're all aware of. So it makes it worse. But yeah, this was just as bad as any concussion you'll ever see. In terms of the game, I think Houston is so fraudulent. I don't even know if I think they're a top 15 team in the NFL. And here they are at 8-5. They're going to win that division. They're going to be the 4 seed. They're going to host a playoff game. I think they are so not that good. They
were up 23-6 in the fourth quarter and almost let Mac Jones mount the comeback. And last week they lost to the 2-win Titans. This week they almost chased that loss with a loss to the 2-win Jags. They're not a good football team. They're just not. It's not the team that it's not what we expected after the way they played last season. This is easily a one and done team in the playoffs for me.
Yeah, I can't wait to bet against them in the playoffs. And whether it's Pittsburgh or Baltimore or the Chargers, whoever it is. And Mac Jones threw for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns with no picks, 20 for 32. That shouldn't happen against anybody. So the Texans defense got some problems there, obviously, if Mac Jones is doing that. So yeah, I think they're so I don't get it at all. There's no way I see them winning a playoff game.
I have a crazy Joe Mixon stat for you.
Let me hear it.
Joe Mixon rushed for 101 yards and a touchdown in this game. He became the first player in NFL history to ever have 6 straight road games with 100+ rushing yards and 1 or more rushing touchdowns. And his splits this season are hilarious. In home games, he's averaged 48.8 yards per game on 2.7 yards per carry. Away games, 115.3 yards per game on 5.3 yards per carry. In home games, he scored at half a touchdown per game. In away games, 1.5 touchdowns per game. So the Texans should do their best to make sure they are on the road in their first round playoff game, because apparently that's the only way Joe Mixon will have a good game.
Yeah, Joe Mixon is such a he's 4.3 yards per carry. Like, I feel like he was kind of included in a lot of these, like, oh, Josh Jacobs and Saquon and Derrick Henry and Joe Mixon on these good teams. And it's like, I don't think the Texans are like happy about the Joe Mixon contract right now. Maybe they're fine with it, but whatever. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the afternoon slate where the Rams travel to New Orleans and win 21-14. They also started slow. They only had 93 yards in the first half as they were shut out for the first time under Sean McVay. But in the second half, they got going. They put up 21 points to win. Kyron Williams rushed 15 times for 104 yards and a touchdown. At the end of the game, the Saints drive down to the Rams' 9-yard line, where on a 4th and 3, Jared Verse hits Derek Carr, and it was ruled to be an incomplete pass instead of a sack fumble, but the result was the same. Jared Verse kind of closed this game out. He had 7 pressures in the game. No other Rams defender had more than 2, and he is now up to 58 pressures and 4.5 sacks on the season. So big season for Jared Verse. Building blocks for the Rams is they're not a serious contender, and we've talked about that, but they definitely hit on their first round pick.
Well, it's their first one in how long? Was it like 8 years that they hadn't had one?
First one since Goff, right?
Goff, yeah, 2016. Yeah, so that's hilarious. Good for them. They don't let the Rams get a first round pick. They're gonna nail it, I guess. So that's what you see. This is another game. I feel like I've kind of crapped on a lot of the winners in some of these games. I was shocked at how bad the Rams looked. I bet the Rams -2.5. I cashed the ticket, and even then, still, I was like, man, not impressed. I think Verse is going to win. We have a comment from Kev Hodgson who's commenting along here, and Daniel Lee, Joe Chick, Kev Hodgson. Shout out to these guys commenting along. We always love interacting with the comments here. He asked if Jared Verse or Quinyon will win Defensive Player of the Year. I think, in my opinion, Quinyon deserves it. I think if you're ranking corners this year as opposed to pass rushers, I think Quinyon ranks a lot higher on the cornerback list than Jared Verse would rank on the pass rusher list. But Jared Verse
at a harder position to play, especially as a rookie.
Absolutely. No arguments here from that at all. But Jared Verse has the flashy numbers, right? So That's what's going to probably win him the award. I don't know where the odds are. I'd actually be curious to hear what the odds are on that. I don't know if they would have him up. It's 111 though. They might have it up by now. But it's Quinyon should win it. Verse will win it, is what I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think Quinyon should win it, and it shouldn't even be close. And Jared Verse is going to win it, and it also won't be close.
I agree.
And I mean, you get people just don't watch games. Like I saw somebody, a reporter, like tweeting about how Russell Wilson should be in the running for MVP after that performance. And it's like, maybe watch more than just the Steelers, and you might realize that's ridiculous. But right now,
what were they when he got benched? 4-1 or 4? Like,
yeah. Right now, it looks like on what site is this? I don't even know. On FanDuel, it looks like Jared Verse is -135 and Quinyon Mitchell is +165 for Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, that's actually it's actually a smaller gap than I would have guessed.
Yeah, I would not be betting on Quinyon in that situation. So let's roll on to Carolina, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win 26-23 in overtime. The Bucs almost losing in Carolina while the Falcons lost the way they did. Like, does anybody actually even want to win this division is my question. Bryce Young led a 60-yard touchdown drive to take a 3-point lead with 30 seconds left. But the Bucs went 36 yards in 27 seconds. And by the way, showed everybody else how to actually manage a clock. and they hit a 51-yard field goal to get it to overtime. In overtime, they miss a 55-yard field goal, and they gave the ball to the Panthers near midfield. But in a role reversal from the Giants-Panthers game, when Tyrone Tracy fumbled in field goal range in overtime, this time it was Chuba Hubbard fumbling in field goal range, and the Bucs hit their second attempt. I thought Bryce Young actually played a good game in this one. He looked more decisive. He looked more comfortable. He had a 10-yard touchdown scramble. Bryce Young has had a couple solid games since he got benched. And so hopefully there's some hope there for Panthers fans. On the offensive side, Bucky Irving should be getting some offensive rookie of the year love, especially if Jaden Daniels, what we saw this week isn't the new normal and he continues to kind of struggle a little bit. Bucky Irving had 152 rushing yards and a touchdown and 33 receiving yards in this game, and he's been very good. And then Baker Mayfield is now 4-0 against the Panthers, who, if you don't remember, cut him a couple seasons ago. So Baker Mayfield revenge game, sort of, as they squeak out a win in Carolina.
Yeah, I actually totally forgot about the Baker revenge game. The problem with Bucky Irving is I think if any non-quarterback's going to win Offensive Player of the Year, it's got to be Bowers. I don't think anybody,
That's true.
If they're going to go outside of QB. Bowers is the best tight end in the sport. But Bucky Irving's awesome. I mean, that's our guy. We love Bucky Irving here. Bryce Young, probably his best game, maybe of his career. It's probably the best two best games of his career the last 2 weeks. It does appear like Canales has kind of fixed a lot of what was wrong with Bryce Young. So I feel like I'm focusing on the loser here, but it's huge for Tampa that they figured out a way to win this game. I think this is probably going to be the difference in Tampa winning the division and not. If Tampa loses this game, you still have to finish one win higher than Atlanta. And that would have been hard to do with 4 games left. You would have had to be 2 wins better than Atlanta in that stretch. But now that you're 6-6 tied with them, you just have to be 1 win better than them for the rest of the stretch. I think more than anything else with takeaways from the game, I think just the result is actually the biggest takeaway. It's just Tampa stayed alive.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the Sunday night game where the Buffalo Bills beat the San Francisco 49ers 35-10 in the snow. Josh Allen was 13 of 17 for 148 yards. He had 2 passing touchdowns, one of which was to himself. He had a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown on 0 receptions, which is funny if you go look up the box score. Josh Allen has 0 receptions for 7 yards and a touchdown. He's the first quarterback in NFL history to have a passing, rushing, and receiving touchdown in the same game. And of course, if you haven't seen the play, he throws the ball to Amari Cooper, who gets stood up, and Amari Cooper lateraled it back to him, and he gets to the pylon for the touchdown. So that was a fun play. The Bills just dismantled the 49ers, and the 49ers are done. They dropped to 5-7. They lose Christian McCaffrey to a knee injury, probably for the year. And so I think you can kiss goodbye. Any thoughts of the 49ers rallying to make the playoffs?
Yeah, I really thought that when McCaffrey came back, they'd be fixed. And then when he did, they weren't. And he didn't look right. And now he's gone. And this season's over. You should probably just bench everybody and sit them the rest of the year and gear up for next year, get a better pick because they're absolutely cooked. Not much to, Buffalo on the other side of it. Obviously, ho-hum. Like this is what we kind of expected from this game. There's not really, Buffalo is very clearly one of the 4 best teams in football, very clearly a full-on Super Bowl contender. Josh Allen, in my opinion, should be the MVP, I guess. Well, I still think Lamar should. They're 8-5. That's a whole other, I won't get into that, can of beans, but I think Josh Allen's going to run away with MVP, and I think it's probably locked up. I know he was minus 250 this morning, so I think that in prime time was probably a big spot for him.
Yeah, we got another comment here from Kev on Twitter saying that Bryce has looked really good the last 2 games. Hopefully he doesn't carry that on this week, though. And yeah, it's bad placement for Bryce Young to catch an Eagles defense that's playing as good as anybody right now. So let's quickly throw back to the Thanksgiving games. We won't spend much time here because these were several days ago, but the Bears at Detroit, the Lions got lucky and win 23-20. They led 23-7 at the start of the 4th quarter. They led 23-13 when they missed a 45-yard field goal with under 9 minutes to play. And then Chicago scores to make it a 3-point game with 5.5 minutes left. Detroit goes 3 and out and punts it back to Chicago. With 3 minutes and 42 seconds left, and all the timeouts. 3.5 minutes, 3 timeouts, and they literally ran out of time trying to get in field goal range and ended the game with a timeout in their pocket. It was ineptitude from beginning to end, but it was capped off with Caleb Williams taking a sack with 26 seconds left. And instead of calling their final timeout, the Bears kept it in their pocket and they simply ran out of time. Matt Eberflus was fired the next morning, 2 hours after they put him out in front of the media for a press conference, which it's just a joke of an organization. There's no words. I already went on my rant, so I won't yell again about clock management, but seriously, it's not that hard. On the Lions side, the Lions didn't look good, but they did get their first win on Thanksgiving in 7 years. So in a game that Eagles really needed the Lions to lose, but that's okay. What did you think about this one?
Caleb Williams looked great in the second half of this game until his brain melted down at the end of the game. But I blame Caleb much less for that than I blame Eberflus for not calling a timeout earlier in that spot, especially when they saw him melting down. But then he got fired. So good for the Bears. I will be betting the Bears next weig in the interim coach game to kind of combat. I think Eberflus was a massively a huge detriment to that team. I think that they'd probably have 3 more wins if Eberflus was just average as a coach. So good for them. I actually think if you're a Bears fan, you probably are happier losing that game and getting Eberflus fired than winning that game. And maybe, going on some run that maybe they would have had to keep him down the stretch. So I think if you're a Bears fan, you have to be happy, especially since Caleb did show what he did show. So I know you lost the game in embarrassing fashion. The end of the game was brutal. You got a better draft pick now, and your head coach is gone. So I think you should be happy about it. Detroit, I can't wait to bet against them this week on Thursday Night Football because they're going to lose to the Packers. And I think the line is telling you a lot. That only being a 3.5-point spread tells you a lot, that they think Green Bay is pretty close to Detroit.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Green Bay. That's the next game on the docket here. They beat Miami 30-17 in a game that was not that close. They opened with a 3-and-out. But the Dolphins fumbled the punt and the Packers scored a touchdown. They scored on their next possession before a punt, and then a touchdown and a field goal found them up 24-3, at halftime. So shout out to the Dolphins for killing narratives in this one. Great little soundbite there from Tua. The Dolphins are a soft football team. I am very thankful that they ran the defensive coordinator who had a top 10 defense down the stretch last year, despite multiple injuries, out of the building, and he was able to come to Philadelphia. Miami missed 20 tackles in this game. It's a soft team. I'm very happy to see them fail based on how the end of season played out last year. But I really want to talk more about Green Bay. And like you mentioned, Thursday night, it's a huge matchup. Green Bay at Detroit. They lost 24-14 at home a little over a month ago. With a win, they would have a shot to win their division and be the 1 seed. They would still be a game behind the Lions, but they would not necessarily lose the tiebreaker. It would also give the Eagles a tiebreaker over Detroit if it comes to that. With a loss, they almost have no shot to win the division. At that point, they would be 3 games behind, which is effectively 4 by tiebreaker. And so this is a huge game for Green Bay. It's win, and you've got a legitimate shot at the 1 seed, and lose, and you have no shot whatsoever at the division.
And I think it's kind of big, just like for the team to go out and beat Detroit. Like, don't lose twice to Detroit. Show up and kind of handle the business one of the times. And I think you have a lot more confidence going into that game in the playoffs. But I've said it all year, I feel like, and I feel it now more than ever. How has there ever been a 9-3 team with a very good quarterback that has ever been blatantly ignored, it feels like, throughout the season as much as the Green Bay Packers have? It feels like they're not one of the lead storylines of this season at all. They're sitting at 9-3. They're like top 5. I don't know if you can get me the DVOA numbers. I know we mentioned them last week. I don't know if they're even updated at this point, but I know that they were like top 5 in offensive DVOA, maybe even higher than that last week. And I'm sure this week only helped. But they have, in my opinion, a top 7 quarterback. They have a bunch of receivers, an O-line that stepped up. Their running back's probably one of the best in the sport. And I think that the defense can make plays when they need to. And obviously they showed up in this game and shut Miami down. And they showed up. They showed up when Jordan Love got hurt and missed some time, when he had some down games. So I think this Green Bay team scares me even more than the Lions do from the Eagles' perspective, which I know sounds dumb because of us beating Green Bay in week 1. I think Green Bay has all the makings of a team that's going to get hot down the stretch and has already started to. I think they've won either 6 of 7 or 7 of 8 now in this stretch. So I think Green Bay is being blatantly ignored. I think they are unequivocally one of the 6 best teams in football. And I think they might be even better than Baltimore, and they might be even better than Detroit. I know that sounds sacrilegious, but again, them only being a 3.5-point dog, I think says a lot about that spread.
They're 4th in offensive DVOA, 13th in defensive, and 5th overall.
Yeah, I'm 5th overall in DVOA, says a lot. They're 4th in offense. You'd think they'd get talked about more for that, especially since Jordan Love missed 2 games and missed the second half of 1 game. And I know that they won those games, but I'm sure that their offensive performance wasn't good in terms of DVOA in those games. So, yeah, I think a 9-3 team that has a really good quarterback and a great top 5 level head coach in LaFleur, and you ignore that team for being 9-3, missing time with their quarterback. It shocks me how little they're being mentioned when teams it just seems like the Lions and Eagles, and that's all anybody's mentioning when they talk about the NFC. And as an Eagles fan, I shouldn't be getting annoyed by that, but I do kind of find myself shocked by it.
Yeah, that'll change Thursday night, I think. And Kev chimes in and says the Lions are stacking up injuries too. They did lose Malcolm Rodriguez for the season on Thanksgiving, so. Let's go on to the Black Friday game. The Chiefs beat the Raiders 19-17, and it is almost a joke at this point how lucky the Chiefs get in end-of-game situations. They block a chip shot field goal to beat the Broncos. The Raiders fumble a snap in field goal range to allow the Chiefs to win this game. The Chiefs had 5 red zone trips, but they only scored 1 touchdown. Mahomes was sacked 5 times, and Aiden O'Connell had a higher QBR and QB rating than Patrick Mahomes. The Raiders had their chances. They missed a field goal. They got stuffed on a 4th and 1, etc. I think for the Raiders, there's 2 main takeaways. One is that Brock Bowers is a stud. He had 10 catches for 140 yards and a touchdown, is the only real threat on the offense. And then Max Crosby, who played 100% of the snaps for his 6th consecutive game. He has now played 387 consecutive snaps, which is the most by a defensive lineman in the next-gen stats era. And then on the Chiefs side, this was Patrick Mahomes' 100th career win, and he is now tied Tom Brady for the fastest to 100 wins. It took them both 126 games. So incredible career so far for Mahomes. We'll see what they're able to do as we go down the stretch into the postseason.
Yeah, I tweeted out that you look at Jalen's record under Sirianni, it's 43-16 under Sirianni. I think it's 44-19 overall. And I was like, man, like that's such a crazy number. Then I looked at Lamar, and Lamar is 66-24. Then I looked at Mahomes, and Mahomes is 85-23. Those win-loss records for those 3 guys is comical. Like, Lamar at 66-24 is insane. And then when you think the fact that Mahomes has 1 less loss and 19 more wins, it just goes to show like just how insane this Mahomes run has been. And that's kind of like my biggest take on the game, to be honest, is everybody it loves doing. And I've done it, I think, multiple times. Like they can't keep getting away with this and all that about the Chiefs and everybody doing they're the 2023 Eagles. Kansas City was actively losing multiple games in a row at this time last year. If you look at last season, on November 20th, they lost 21-17 to the Eagles. On December 3rd, they lost 27-19 to the Packers. They lost 20-17 to the Bills. They beat the crappy Patriots. They lost 20-14 on Christmas to the Raiders. They beat the Bengals, and then in Week 18, their backups came in and won a game. They closed the year 4-4. Or 3-4, if you just look at their starters games over their last 7 games that the starters played. So everybody's freaking out saying this year's different. Oh, the Chiefs can't get it back this year. I think they were much more vulnerable last year, and they still made it through the playoffs and still won the Super Bowl. This team's 11-1. I get that they've shown some flaws down the stretch here. They showed flaws down the stretch last year, and they went 3-4 in their last 7 games. They haven't done that at all. We'll see if they do over the next 4 games. Maybe they collapse. Maybe I'm wrong. I think a lot of the Chiefs narratives out there about them not being as good this year, everybody's doing the they can't keep getting away with this. I think what they can't keep getting away with this is tricking you people out there. You people out there who think, oh, well, this year's different. Kansas City, they're washed. They're cooked. It's Buffalo's year. It's Baltimore's year. How many times have we done this? How many times? I can't do this anymore. I can't listen to people talk about how vulnerable the Chiefs are. We've done this for the last 5 years. Like, it's unbelievable.
The only active quarterback to beat Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game will not be in the playoffs in Joe Burrow. So
seems 4-8.
Yeah, we'll see. So there you have it. That is our review of Week 13. Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any other final thoughts you want to lay on the people?
I'll switch it to college football because I've been talking about it on Twitter this morning. The college football playoff, obviously in full swing. Regular season's over. Conference championships are next week. I love SMU to beat Clemson in the ACC title game. I was going to place a large bet on SMU minus 2.5. They are favored by 2.5 to win that game. Someone sent me the odds to make the college football playoff on DraftKings. I saw Alabama was plus 100. If you look at how it's going to break down, if SMU wins, I find it really extremely hard to believe that Bama's not in. You look at where the rankings were last week. I don't think anything's happened that's going to change the guys behind them. They beat South Carolina, so I don't think South Carolina can jump them. I think if you're like me and you thought that you were going to bet SMU against Clemson, instead, just bet Bama plus 100 to make the playoffs. Because if SMU wins, Bama's in. That way, you throw away the 2.5 points. Instead of betting SMU minus 2.5, you're basically betting SMU money line by Bama to make the playoffs. And as a little insurance, if SMU gets blown out, we all know that the committee's going to put in a 9-3 Alabama over an 11-2 SMU that just got blown out in their last game of the year. So I think Bama plus 100 to make the playoffs on DraftKings is an absolute steal. They're minus 120 and higher on some other books. So my final thought, take Bama to make the playoff.
All right, there you have it, guys. That's going to do it. Thank you for joining us for episode 180 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcast. The Eagles Pin Pull Network, we've got a lot of shows coming out every week, and you can check them all out. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr., and we will catch you guys next time.